Very terrible thing. Steve, Russia, Ukraine, we're making a lot of progress. Could you explain that?
The Ukrainians actually said that we've made more progress since Geneva than they've seen in the last 4 years of that conflict.
And I personally asked President Putin not to fire into Kiev and the various towns for a week. And he agreed to do that. And I have to tell you, it was very nice. A lot of people said, don't waste the call. You're not going to get that. And he did it. And we're very happy that they did it.
That's correct.
Because on top of everything else, it's not what they need is missiles coming into their towns and cities. So I just thought I should say it. I thought it was a very good thing. And Ukraine was almost, they didn't believe it, but they were very happy about it because they are struggling badly.
Kyiv residents camped in the underground as outside temperatures dropped to minus 17 degrees Celsius. While above ground, explosions were heard and air defence systems were activated. A renewal of hostilities which has left a bitter taste ahead of new ceasefire negotiations starting on Wednesday.
Hello, Bobby Jones here from MeidasTouch and Valor Media Networks. And today I want to take a look at a moment that says a lot about where the United States now currently stands in the world. Just days before scheduled ceasefire talks in Abu Dhabi, the U.S. negotiated pause in fighting between Ukraine and Russia collapsed. Russia's strikes resumed, Ukraine retaliated, and the diplomatic effort that the Trump administration had promoted as progress fell apart almost immediately. This wasn't just a failure of a single negotiation, it's a reflection of something much larger. The growing perception that U.S. diplomacy is no longer credible, no longer steady, and no longer trusted. The Trump administration framed the ceasefire as a breakthrough, an agreement to pause attacks, particularly on energy infrastructure, while talks were set to resume in Abu Dhabi. Ukraine agreed cautiously. President Zelensky made it clear that it was conditional, and he recognized how fragile it actually was. Russia, meanwhile, violated it almost immediately. Missile and drone attacks resumed within days. Ukrainian power infrastructure was hit again. Mind you, this is during one of the harshest winters Ukraine had seen in a long time. Civilian areas were struck, and by the time diplomats were supposed to reconvene, the ceasefire was effectively meaningless. This is the core problem. A ceasefire only works if all sides believe it will be enforced. Russia clearly did not believe that. And that brings us to the credibility issue. For decades, U.S. diplomacy worked not because America was perfect, but because it was predictable. Allies believed U.S. guarantees would last beyond news cycles. Adversaries believed violations would actually carry consequences. Under the Trump administration, that predictability is long gone. Threats are made publicly, negotiations are announced impulsively, agreements are floated without enforcement mechanisms. And then when things fall apart, the United States moves on to the next headline. That's pretty much what's happened in the last year of the Trump administration. And that's why what happened next matters so much. According to reporting by the Financial Times and Reuters, Ukraine has now secured a new tiered security framework involving NATO, the United States, and key European Union member states. And what's unique is this structure is very deliberate and revealing. Tier 1 involves NATO and European guarantees. At the top of the tier, European and NATO-led commitments include long-term military assistance, intelligence sharing, integrated air and missile defense support, and rapid response coordination if Russia violates future agreements. This tier is designed to function regardless of whatever U.S. political volatility is occurring. Tier 2, U.S. support. The United States is included, but is not the sole guarantor of security. The U.S. support focuses on more logistics, arms transfer, intelligence cooperation, and financial backing. But critically, the enforcement backbone still sits with NATO and Europe, where Washington is not a primary factor. Tier 3 then brings in economic and institutional integration. Ukraine's accelerated integration with European defense and economic systems, another signal that long-term stability is being anchored in Brussels and not Washington, D.C. The message is unmistakable. Europe is building a security architecture that can survive the United States and its inconsistency when it looks at diplomacy. European leaders have learned the lesson because they watched the U.S. exit the Iran nuclear deal. They saw the abandonment of Kurdish allies in Syria. They saw the collapse of Afghan planning, and now they've seen a ceasefire that dissolved almost instantly once set up. So Europe has said we're not going to rely on the United States, and themselves will step up in diplomatic and military support if necessary. Now, mind you, this is not out of necessarily anti-American sentiment, but out of necessity. At Davos this year, multiple officials privately acknowledged that EU and NATO commitments are now viewed as more reliable than United States commitments because they are consensus-based, institutional, and are much harder to reverse overnight. That is not how the system used to work, but it's how it works now. The same credibility problem is playing out with the United States in Iran as we speak.
The President's been clear from the beginning, as he was before Midnight Hammer. Iran will not have nuclear weapons capabilities. And so they can either negotiate on that front or we have other options. That's why the War Department exists. He doesn't want to go that route. I don't want to go that route. But our job is to be prepared. And so, of course, we are, and we are more than prepared. But President Trump's committed to peace. He's committed to a deal. If Iran's serious about making a deal, and we'll see. That's up to Iran.
Is regime change a possibility?
It's not. Right now, our job is to be prepared, and Iran has a choice about whether or not they want to negotiate on their nuclear capabilities or not.
The United States has proposed renewed talks over Iran's nuclear program. Mind you, before President Trump entered office the first term, President Obama had secured a nuclear deal that not only Iran respected, but the rest of the world. Now, as this new proposal has taken place, Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, has publicly threatened military action before negotiations even begin. This is not leverage. It's a contradiction. Diplomacy relies on signaling seriousness and restraint. Threats before talks signal that none of this is going to be taken serious, that diplomacy is secondary to military might and the whole might makes right mentality of the current Trump administration. Basically, diplomacy has become performative and not substantive. Iran's leadership has taken note, so the U.S. allies in the region have to question what's going to happen to them if they cannot rely on the United States' word.
Esta parte que está ahí, detrás de esta montaña, es donde estaba la casa presidencial.
Ok, wow.
Entonces los helicópteros se posicionaron en esta zona y sobre la casa, la vivienda del presidente y sobre esta parte. Desde aquí comenzaron los ataques.
En eso sur sale otra explosión y bueno, dije, una búsqueda. Dije, los malditos cumplieron su palabra.
Fue fuerte. De hecho, hasta me daba cosa con mi hijo porque es un niño y nos quedó la situación de que no quería dormir porque cada ruido que se escuchaba era pensar que volvían ellos.
A nadie le gusta que intervenga en su país. A nadie. Pero sin el 3 de enero no se hubiera abierto la expectativa de un cambio político. La expectativa de un cambio político.
Somos una roca indestructible. Somos una roca que no la van a detener ni la van a poder destruir jamás. Jamás.
Nosotros estamos actuando, el Estado venezolano, inclusive los venezolanos que estamos aceptando esta nueva situación, que estamos actuando bajo coerción. No estamos actuando porque queremos. Nos secuestraron a nuestros comandantes, nos secuestraron a nuestras instituciones y tenemos que ceder. Tenemos que vivir para un nuevo combate.
And then there's Venezuela. After U.S. military action removed the country's president, Washington now finds itself in the uncomfortable position of having to take the remaining leadership there in Venezuela at its word, without legitimacy, without a clear transition plan, and without international consensus. This is what happens when diplomacy is sidelined in favor of force. You lose leverage, you lose allies, and you lose control of outcomes. It's the opposite of strategic leadership. Strategic leadership means long-range thinking, and it is very obvious that the current administration is not doing that. The collapse of the Ukraine ceasefire isn't just about Ukraine. It's about the world adjusting to the reality that U.S. diplomacy is no longer assumed to be functional. Allies are hedging, Europe is leading, NATO is restructuring guarantees, and American influence, once automatic, now has to be completely rebuilt. Diplomacy doesn't fail all at once. It erodes over time, and it erodes when promises stop meaning what they used to. And right now, the world is responding accordingly.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.